Welcome back to the Writing Craft podcast, you guys. I'm your host, Jenna.
And I am your host, Holly.
And today we're talking about envy in the publishing industry and envy between our fellow writers and sort of how we can combat these negative feelings we might face, because let's face it, we're all going to deal with them.
Yeah, and I think that this is a really important topic, and we've touched on it in little bits before, and it's really important to talk about, not only for dealing with it within yourself, but also for dealing with it when you have that come up against you with other people, because it's going to happen. Like, no matter how much of a creative angel you are, there's going to be some envy in there somewhere. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody that I've ever known as a creative person, they've always been like, I wish I had what the other person across the screen from me has, or like in person has. And I think that's a fair thing to use as motivation to, push yourself to go and achieve more, work harder. If that gets you riled up, then sure. But I think, the envy becomes a negative thing when you go and take how you feel. And this is, regardless of any type of feeling you're feeling, but you take how you feel, which is valid that you feel that way, but then you make it other people's problem and you act according to your feelings as if they were fact. Like, I feel like I deserve this thing, so I'm gonna make it everyone else's problem that I deserve this thing and I don't have it, and I'm gonna hate on anybody who has this thing. That's when it becomes very negative and dangerous to have, and that unfortunately we see a lot of in any sort of creative community.
Yeah, and I think a really good way to approach that is, like you said at the beginning of your statement there, there's always a good way to look at a negative emotion, right? And I think that's probably what we're going to focus on here, because you hear envy and that just sounds like something kind of icky, right? Like, no one really wants to admit to being envious. No one wants to say, yeah, I'm envying that person over there. I find that even for myself, when I've gone through phases where I'm maybe looking at a certain profile on Instagram too much of this person who's doing really well and everything they make seems to be really perfect, I'm going to come up with different ways to say it, right? Like, this person, they're doing really cool things. I could do this. We'll always sort of work around it. You'll never straight up just say, like, I envy the hell out of this person. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that. Be like, yes, this is what's happening in this moment. I'm looking at this person. I am being like purely 100% envious. What am I going to do with that?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, that's like your decision to make, is that no matter what kind of feeling you're feeling, and especially if it comes to envy or jealousy or anything like that, like, feel your feelings, understand that you're feeling that way. Don't make it other people's problem, but then at the end of the day, decide, what are you going to do about the way that you feel? Are you going to wallow and loathe over the person who has what you don't have, or are you going to go and make it so that you also have that person? So are those things that person has, are you going to make it so that then other people are going to be envious of you, and you're going to be like, in your head, as soon as you hear someone's envious of you for XYZ, you're going to be like, hey, I worked my ass off for this thing. But in your head, when you were envious of someone with the same exact situation that you're now in, you didn't think about the fact that they worked really hard for that thing. And granted, some people do not work hard for what they have. Some people are just fucking lucky and were gifted a lot of
Yeah.
things, and they have
Yeah.
an upper hand in life. And
That
that's,
does happen.
yeah, that's just the way the fucking cookie crumbles, my friend. Like, let's, like, their life's not fair. But in my personal belief system, like, we reincarnate into these lives for a reason, to learn certain lessons. So if you were not in that lucky, position, in my point of view, like, your soul chose that life for you to go and work hard to learn something along the way. So are you going to actually put in the work to learn that, or are you going to have to learn this lesson in the next life again and again, or even in a future situation? Let's say you give up on writing, you want to go paint, murals or whatever. You're going to go find someone there to be envious of as well. Like, there's going to be someone who's always 5 steps ahead of you and 5 steps behind you. And that's, no matter what area of your life you're in, you're always going to find that same situation play out again and again and again until you learn whatever lesson you're supposed to learn with it. And for that, lesson is different for everybody.
Exactly, and we've said this before as well, that people who seem to have it very easy, there's a couple things to consider. Either one, they might not have it as easy as you think they do. Like, you don't see all the work that, that iceberg that they've done before rising to the surface and showing you what you're looking at. And also, maybe if they haven't done the work, they're dealing with other shit. Like, people who have things handed to them too easily, it's going to come out in other ways. They're going to deal with other things. So count yourself lucky to just be dealing with your own problems. and get through those. And the other thing that I want to point out is that with creative fields, the jealousy can be a lot more difficult to deal with, I think, just because of how personal creativity is, right? And that's something that makes it even more important to try to control, because like, look at it this way: in my day job I do copywriting, so like marketing writing, and obviously there's a certain talent and all of that to it. But when I'm doing something like writing a blog post with SEO in it, I'm optimizing for search engine optimization, and it's like, maybe someone's doing that better than me. I can oftentimes take a course to just buff up my knowledge, and suddenly I'm in that same place as that other person that I was looking at. And with writing and painting and the creative arts, you can't necessarily do that. You can do that in little ways, but you cannot harness someone else's creativity. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because even if you're looking at people, I'm going to go on like a whole tangent here. Sorry. But even if you're, there's a term for this and I can't remember it, but it'll come to me later. There is actually a term for how, and I'll use a good example. If you are writing on a birthday card or something, and you're writing the person's name on a card, you'll look at your own writing and you'll go like, well, most of the time, like, that doesn't look nice. That doesn't look pretty. And you get a friend to do it, and somehow it looks incredible, right? So there's this disconnect in our brains that connects our creativity sort of too personally, and makes us think negatively of it, because that's kind of how we're at in a default. We're going to be critical of ourselves. And then, even keeping this in mind, something as simple as writing a name on a birthday card, I use this because this happens to me all the time. You get your friend to do it and it looks perfect. That's barely even art, right? So you have to keep in mind that that is a thing. Your brain is going to want to do this like very personal self-sabotage, and that is one of the reasons why we have that jealousy feeling when we look at other people's work.
Yeah, and I mean, we're so close to everything that we create. Like, no matter what it is that you're making, you're looking at like this. Like, you're in the, if you're thinking of like any creative piece you're working on as a face, you're in the pores. Like, you're in the dirt, the grime. Like, you see every single flaw. And so many people also look at themselves that way. And they see every single thing that could possibly be wrong about themselves. And then, because art is so personal, we then attach everything we feel like is wrong about ourselves to everything we feel like is wrong with our art. And our art is usually our passion. It's a piece of ourselves. We put pieces of ourselves in it. And so then when we look at it, not from, the person who's enjoying it, but from that critical eye constantly and incessantly, and then we go over and enjoy someone else's work, we think, oh my god, it's beautiful, effortless, like they wrote this thing so quicker than I did, they published way quicker than I did, it must just come easier to them. And a lot of the time you're just not seeing, again, that iceberg of all of the things that they went and had to go through to be able to get there. And they're going to look at their piece of art the same exact way. Like, people fucking as great as like George R.R. Martin, or fucking any big author you can think of, I can imagine that they look at their own stuff and they're like, why do people even enjoy this? They're looking at it and questioning themselves, and they're going to go and enjoy someone else's piece of art and go, oh my god, this is great, flawless, fantastic, why is no one picking this up and loving it and reading it as much as like they pick up my books? And in reality, they're in the pores. They cannot see anything beyond all of the flaws that they are internalizing so deeply within themselves.
That's such a good comparison, and it reminds me of, there's it's either an interview on video or not. Like, it's been a while since I saw this, but I do know that there was a discussion between George R. R. Martin and I think Stephen King. And Stephen King is like prolific as hell, right? And they're both huge names. And George R. R. Martin is talking to Stephen King and saying like, how how do you do this? And it's like their art is so different, like the type of literature they're doing is so different, yet they're both looking at the other person like, how do you do this thing? Stephen King's looking at George R. R. Martin probably being like, how do you build this like massive world that you put so much detail into, while George R. R. Martin is like, how do you put out more than like half a book in a decade, right? And it's these very different forms of art, very different people. They're both doing very high level stuff, but even at that level, they're like I'm missing something. I'm not doing this thing right. How am I going to do this better? And that's a constant thing that you just have to live with as an artist. And that's, that's the tough truth of it, right?
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's, you can go and be envious. Like, you can be George R. R. Martin and wish you had multiple books out like every single year, or
I
you
wish
can
you did.
accept that, right? Like, and so many people do. But also, he kind of honors, in a way, his process of it takes the time that it takes. However, for most of us, we do not have that luxury of George R. R. Martin. And so if we're like, hey, it took me a really long time to finish a book, what can I do about it? Well, instead of being envious of people who write faster than you can go and look and consume so much of their content, their advice, talk to them, do sprints with them, implement some of the things that they do into your own practices so you can write quicker. That's been one of the main, I know, things that I've had to overcome, is feeling super envious of people who can write a book so quickly. And then those same people will look at me and go, hey, you type like 1,300 words on average in a 30-minute sprint. I write every single day and it takes me a week just to get to 2K, but they're doing it so much more consistently than I'm doing my sprints, which is why when I actually sit down to write, I will bust out very easily between a 3 and a 10K day. But then I'm envious of other people who go and they sit down every single day. And I'm like, man, I wish I could write even just a little bit every single day. And it's not a habit that I've created for myself. But they look at me like, I wish I could type as fast as you. So I've been literally looking at my friends who write books and are, a couple steps again ahead of me, implementing some of ther practices. And I just did you're going to see this in the future, but for us filming, we're in the past here in June, and I just finished a 24K, or not 24K, a 24 hour novel challenge where I wrote almost 30K in 3 days. And so that was about on average 10K a day. And I'll occasionally do like a random one off 10, 5K a day, and it's no sweat. But then doing religiously writing every single day taught me how much I can actually write and accomplish that I didn't even realize for myself. And the only reason I knew that was because I was not envious of other people who were doing this challenge. I went and decided I was going to even take time off of work to work on this challenge. I was going to go and clear out my entire schedule for this weekend so that I could go and sprint with friends and decide what, I see what I'm actually capable of, see how much I can actually write, how far can I actually get my story, and start implementing and talking to my friends I was sprinting with to go and learn what they're doing and how they're bettering their craft, and start implementing it for myself. So I was only able to do all of that because I allowed for myself to go, okay, I'm envious of other people who get to have these days that they just block off for writing. But what am I going to do about that? Am I going to continue to be pissed about people who get to go and spend their entire day writing? Like, if I looked at my friend Capri and I was like, I'm so jealous of the fact that, like, she gets to spend an entire day writing, a large portion of the time and working on her publishing stuff. Okay, I could just be pissed off, lose a friend because I'm gonna mouth off and different things like that, or can I actually talk to her, see what she's doing that I want to implement in my own practices, sprint with her because she's sprinting all the time anyways, so why not join her and motivate myself to go and write more? And she literally said, like, join me whenever. And then also because she shared about the challenge, I did the challenge, and now I'm through 30K deeper into my book. I've learned a lot about my craft, my practices, my ability to write. I'm writing more religiously now, and I was able to do all of that because instead of just living and simmering in those feelings, I took it upon myself to go, okay, I really want to be able to dedicate an entire day to writing. Let's go hard, dedicate an entire 3 days to writing, see what I'm capable of. And now I'm not envious anymore because I see how fucking hard it is to dedicate an entire day to writing. I used to do that, sure, in high school, but this is not high school anymore. And now I know how much effort and work it does take to even keep focused on your craft for a good 8, 10 hours a day. And so now the envy is gone. Instead, I just respect the hell out of her and everything she does and everyone who did that challenge. So it's a completely different ballpark when you go and actually take, okay, I'm envious of this thing. Let me try it for myself. Let me go after it for myself. And I think that's the big switch that a lot of people, unfortunately, they stay on the other side of things versus going and deciding that they're going to go after something for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's a perfect example of how you can see something that someone else is doing and actually implement it and make it happen for yourself. And some people who are still in that rut might be thinking, like, yeah, but the things I'm envious of, I can't implement. You're going to be able to implement it somehow. Like, if you are genuinely focusing in on someone and you're feeling that, that green monster, if you're feeling that jealousy building up in you, look and see, okay, so first you have to put aside, like, your art is probably not ever going to be exactly the same as someone else's, and you don't want it to be anyway. Like, you don't. I, for example, I love Virginia Woolf. She's my favorite author. I like her style and everything. I adore it, and I try to implement elements of that, in that I will read her regularly when I'm about to write, so that I have that sort of mood in my head. But I don't want to write exactly like Virginia Woolf, because that's not my voice. That's Virginia Woolf's voice. So you're never going to do that, and you shouldn't want to. So acknowledge that, and then pull back and go, okay, so what element aside from that am I feeling envious of? And like you said, I want this, I want to be able to put aside a whole day to just work on writing. Okay, how are you going to do that? There's holidays. Even if you're working a job where you don't have holiday time that you can take off the exact day you want to, you're going to have, like, you're bound to have a couple days off throughout the year. So dedicate one of those days off and see how you like it. See how it works for you. It might not even work for you. You might do it and then be like, I really hate that, and I like just writing a little bit in the evenings. You don't know. So there's always going to be something that, when you're looking at someone and lusting after what they have, you can take some element of that and work on it for yourself. And absolutely, the best thing is, if you are able to connect with that person and learn from them, you're not always going to be able to. Like, I can't cold call again George R.R. Martin and be like, hey George, you want to, like, hang out and, I don't know, have some nachos and tell me how to work on my fantasy novel better? Like, that's not going to happen. So you can't do that. But talking on the level of people on, say, AuthorTube or Instagram and stuff like that, just shoot them an email. You never know what they're going to respond to. Generally, people are pretty helpful in the author sphere online. And I don't know, like, you can join their communities, like if they have a Discord community and stuff like that. You go in wanting to collaborate rather than wanting to hate and destroy, and just be in a little, like, ball of tangled up misery. That's the important thing here.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just, even for bigger authors, there were going to be things like interviews with them, their blog posts, they might have done some own advice for themselves in the past. And I
Brandon
don't,
Sanderson's Patreon.
yeah, that too. And a lot of these things are free and accessible. And of course, you can do things like master classes or the Patreons to get in a little bit deeper with people. But, I think too, there's a difference between being envious of somebody because they have something that you want, or because you feel like you should want what they have, right? There's tons of people who go and want to go and be full-time authors where they don't have a day job anymore. But is that what you really want, or do you actually just not like the job that you have?
Yeah.
You will not know until you're in the situation of actually having to rely on your writing as an income, or actually not having your job anymore. And you don't want to have to get to that desperate point of you're already finally getting what you want and then realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. Like, I think to my friend who bought a house, and he's like, never buy a house. And that's like one of my dreams, to own a home. And he's like, no, I wish I could literally just call maintenance to fix whatever's
I've
wrong.
had that happen. Yeah. My ex, who's a very close friend of mine, he's had a house for a couple years, and right now, like, I'm building up to buy a house and land, and he is selling his house to go and move into an apartment back in the city, because he's like, I am miserable. This is the worst thing ever. And I'm like, really? So yeah, I mean, you might have this, like, glamorized idea of something, and some people even latch onto stuff while they're scrolling Instagram in the moment and just be like, I want to do that. Like, I've known a couple of people who have just seen that, a sort of glamorized version of being authors. They haven't written, like, they haven't written throughout their life, and they just go, no, that's it. That's what I want to be, because I saw that on Instagram. And it's like, is it though? Is it? Is that your dream? Is that really your passion? Is that your thing? Or did something just catch you, and now you might, like, mess up your life because of it?
I know. I swear so many people, they go, I want to be an author because I saw the author of Lightlark on a TV thing. I've seen an author do an interview on TV. I'm like, okay, do you actually want to be an author, or do you think that it's actually easy to write a book and become famous off of it because all you know is Harry Potter and the Hunger Games? And so then that, you think that all of a sudden that that's what you want to do simply because that's the example that you've seen, but you dive surface level beneath that and you're going to realize very quickly that it's not like that whatsoever. But imagine you're in your 80s, you've always wanted to write a book, you finally, sit down to write one, and you've wanted this your entire life. You sit down and you realize you fucking hate it. Like, you spent your entire life beginning like, I'm going to do this one day, I'm going to do this one day, I'm going to do this one day, pushing yourself, motivating yourself, and then all of a sudden everything that you accomplished to get to that point where you would actually have enough free time to work on a book, you realize that I could have been motivated by something else, done something I was more passionate about earlier in life, and not thought about this one thing that I never even tried until basically it was too late. Not to say that you can't write a book in your 80s if that's actually what you enjoy doing, but if you're already at that point where you're in your later stages of life and saying, okay, I've always wanted to do this thing, let me finally do it, and you never tried it when it was a little bit easier for you to accomplish, to get the things that you wanted from it, then like what was the point? You worked the 9 to 5, you got the house, you got the picket fence and the 3 kids, and then now what? You thought all of that was a precursor to actually chasing your dreams versus just chasing what you actually want and desire, and you're never going to know unless you try.
That is such an important thing, and kind of the theme of my year, honestly. Not in the world of writing, although I did have that moment with NaNoWriMo. Like, because I've written forever. I've always loved writing, but I came at it while like waiting for the muse. I never made it work. I never scheduled for it. It was like, I primarily was doing visual arts, and like that's what I went to school for, was fine arts and then photography. So I was very visual, but writing would sometimes, it would hit me and I'd go to a coffee shop and write 30 pages and just work on things, and it never struck me as like the thing. And then when the pandemic hit and I started working from home, I was like, I'm going to do NaNoWriMo and just like see how this works. And it was scary because not only had I never actually, I mean, I finished a novel when I, quote unquote, novel when I was 8 years old. It was like, it was not that long. Like I filled a notebook, right? So I'd done that, but I hadn't finished like a larger novel. And so suddenly I was going to do that. I was going to see if I could do that. And I was going to start my YouTube channel at the same time. So I started those things in tandem. And the whole point of doing that was, this is scary, but I've been thinking about this in my head and looking at other people doing it and dreaming about it. And, my parents are in the art and literary world. So like I've seen a lot of it. Right. And I just thought, I have to do this. This is the time. You need to pay attention to timing. You need to pay attention to how you're feeling when you pursue anything. And I mean, even like looking at the moon phases and looking at celestial bodies and what's going on in your life at this moment, and everything, the stars aligned. And I went into this to test it all in. And as it turned out, thankfully, it worked, and it's something that I'm passionate about and that I love, and the rest is history, right? But the worst thing you can do is sit here on your phone, doom scrolling, and being miserable when you could be figuring out steps you can take to make your life more the way that you want it to be, whether that is in a creative field or if you try that and it doesn't wind up being it. Because like, there's nothing wrong with failure as long as you know when to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, failure is just a lesson, so it doesn't, you know, I feel like so many creative people, especially, they see any failure as just a mark against them. They feel like they got an F in school. They feel like it, yeah, and I'm like, okay, but everybody kind of fails their way to whatever they deem as their version of success, right? So you're never going to be able to figure out what you actually want to do with your life creatively or personally or professionally if you don't actually give it a shot and try it for yourself. So, for a very long time when I was growing up, I always wanted to, the careers that I wanted were basically singer in a rock band and in movies and different things like that. And so a lot of the times people were like, "Oh, she's so theatric. She just wants to be like, famous and get attention. She's, an attention whore, blah 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 blah." Right. So like I grew up with that kind of thing, and I was always wondering like, am I? Is that why I'm seeking out these things? Like, is that what I'm actually wanting? And then I ended up starting getting into writing, because of Twilight in the 6th grade. And I was like, okay, I was looking at people online. I was like, yeah, there's some authors who are really popular, like Stephanie Meyer and all these other authors, but I was like, but not really. And this seems to be what's calling to me the most. And that's something that I grabbed with both hands really tightly to. And I was like, do I actually think that one day I could be super famous from writing? Like that would be really cool. Yeah, that'd be great, And in theory, I don't know what that experience is, but I'm not envious of other people because of their fame. I'm envious of other people because they're getting to tell their stories. And in reality, that's why I gravitated towards theater and towards music and towards, like TV film. Like I went to acting school, I was in a band, like all these different things because I was seeking out different ways to tell a bazillion stories that I had in my head. And the easiest way for me to do that with very little barrier to entry to get things flowing was to write. Because sure, there are, gatekeepers in publishing, but at the same time, if you're like in a band, you have to wait for your bandmates to come together, decide on a story together. And I didn't really necessarily want to do that kind of collaborating. If I was doing a movie, I needed other actors, I needed a director, I needed a set. It was a lot more income you needed to get those things started versus with writing, I could just sit down with my brain, pay for a subscription for Microsoft to be able to get Word going, and then everything could flow out of me. I didn't necessarily have to collaborate with anyone if I didn't want to. It was fully something on my own. Now, of course, I'd love to collaborate with other people on like novellas or short stories or, like co-writing projects, different things like that. But, as a teenager who had so many worlds to tell on her own, I wasn't necessarily interested in the idea of collaborating on needing to change my ideas with other people. I even remember being a teenager and I had this friend who's sadly passed now, but me and him were working on a story together, and I always remember getting so frustrated with him because I was like, no, we need to make the story this way, like, and we would butt heads on it and be so funny, and we'd go there and we'd draw like each other's characters and different things like that, and we had like I think I still have it to this day somewhere around here, but it was this blue folder with just a billion little drawings and snippets of this world we never actually started writing together. And to this day, that's the only thing I have left from him. But I remember being so frustrated with him because I didn't want to collaborate. And now I would like desperately want to collaborate with people. Like I want to go and like compare thoughts and stories and things with people. So what you want and desire and what you envy will change, as well as the fact that, figuring out your why behind why you're seeking things is going to be important. Because if you're seeking one thing because you think it's going to get you a certain result and you're envious of so many other people because they have that result, so you think they have what you want, but you're trying to achieve it in the wrong way. If you're looking at authors because you want fame from them and that's what you actually desire, and then you actually become a published author and you realize it's not like that, you're going to be disappointed. If you're doing it because of the love of stories, you're going to be far more satisfied because you've completed something. And so your motivation behind things and why you're specifically envious of certain people but not other people is going to be very telling of why you actually want the things that you want.
Oh, I love this. So many things I'm trying to keep in my head. You made so many points here that I wanted to comment on. First of all, I just have to say I love what you brought up about the many worlds, because that has absolutely been my thing with writing as well. I like I said, I did a lot of visual arts, and that sort of translated into modeling as well. And I have had people say like, "Oh, it's an egotistical thing to be doing photo shoots and modeling." And when I say modeling, I don't mean like runway or anything like that. I'm too short. I went to a talent search and they told me your look is too unique. I'm like, oh, thanks. Like I don't know what that means, but okay. But I went into artistic, creative, alternative modeling, and when people would say to me, oh, that's egotistical, you liked getting your photo taken, it felt so weird because that was not even on my radar. That had nothing to do with it at all. The only thing was I loved creating these visuals, and it was hard to do the collaboration with that. And I wanted to get it exactly right. And the way to get that exactly right was to just photograph myself, or like plan out a shoot and have someone else photograph me, but like I was the art director essentially. And it was always about that, and it was always about telling a story, having a theme. When I was doing my art events, that's what it was. And I think that is one of the things for me, like why writing crystallized as what I wanted to do, because any other artistic field that you're going to go into, you can't explore as many worlds. You sort of can in drawing and comics and stuff, but there And I'm hesitating with how to say this because I don't want it to seem like writing is an easy way out, because it's absolutely not. But if you are a writer, right? So for me, I would say I am a writer. And uh, for visual art, I like it. I do it for fun now. But it felt like work if I was really trying to work on a comic or something like that and do all of that art. And for writing, I was able to finally just easily plot out and make all these worlds and be able to live in all the worlds. And big surprise, I don't do that many photo shoots anymore because I'm writing. And one of the really important things with that is collaborating, and I think that's something that we're both gonna sort of zero in on here, in terms of envy and jealousy, is that you do really have to learn to collaborate, and that is where you are going to get like the most strength from, for sure. Because even if you are someone who has all of your own worlds and you want to have control over that, sometimes it is really inspiring to have someone else come in and do that. And I had a creative partner like you had, where we would collaborate and we would write back and forth, and sometimes it would drive me nuts when she would be like, my character's doing this now to your character. And I was like, no, you're not. Like, what are you talking about? That's not happening. Like, bitch. But like, we had fun and it was great, but there were definitely times where I was like, this isn't it. And now we have reconnected, and I've sent her my draft for the novel, which is based on our long RPG, like over 9,000 pages of RPG. And she's going through and she's making comments and we're collaborating. And where I'm at now, where I've evolved to, it's like it's the best thing ever. It's great. And you will, I don't know, I hesitate to say guarantees, but I could pretty much say this is a guarantee. Once you start collaborating with other creative people and putting that envy aside and channeling it into motivation, you're going to feel so good. There's just like this good, powerful feeling of having a true creative connection, being able to collaborate, and just like taking inspiration from one another. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, in terms of like superpower, superhero, supervillain kind of, motifs to use in your brain. One of the things that I've heard a lot of authors talk about is that they have like their author nemesis, who might even be like their friend, and they don't ever make it that person's problem, but they go and take all of that envy and that jealousy and all of those feelings that they have, and they find one person who's just like achieving fantastic things, right? And they could be like genuinely a very good person, or they could actually be like really shit person. Like if you want to go and make your enemy J.K. Rowling, fantastic, be my guest. That's a piece of shit. Have fun. But they go and they find like one person who they're like, I'm never gonna really, most of the time it's like I'm never really gonna interact with them, but they're my nemesis now. Like I want so much of what they have for actual genuine reasons of they're going and killing it, and so I'm gonna use that to motivate myself to like beat my nemesis. I want to get more sales than them. I want to do this, and so that's a way to turn your envy and your jealousy into like a positive thing, because you're not making it the other person's problem, and you're making it into a fun, challenging game with yourself to go and achieve more than that person has, not out of a sense of like I hate that person, blah blah blah, but more as a sense of like, hey, they're killing it, they're doing great things, I really love it, like the energy that they have, the things that they're going after align with what I'm going after, maybe we have like similar genres to each other that we're writing or whatever, and they're like, that person's my nemesis, I'm gonna beat them. And you might be someone else's nemesis, they're like, but in like a positive or in a negative way, where they're like, hey, I hate this bitch, like I want everything she had, she seems to get it so easy. Like that's on the negative side of the envy wheel. And one thing I found out, I think last year, that was so powerful for me is that I looked up the actual definitions of envy and jealousy and fully realized that they are completely different things, but they are the same, like different sides of the same coin. So envy is when you want something that someone else has. Jealousy is when you're afraid that someone's going to take what is already yours. And so,
Oh,
yeah, right?
interesting.
Mind blown. Words have power. And so when we're envious of someone, we want something that they have, we want something that they have, right? And jealousy only really becomes a factor after we've already obtained something, right? And we, obviously people get the words conflated between the two. But so I would rather live in a space where I, of course, am going to be envious of people ahead of me, knowing that I have people behind me who are envious of me, and the people ahead of me might be jealous of me because
You're coming up.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm, I'm, I'm coming up, and that I've made them my quote unquote nemesis. But we can all have those kind of feelings of like, oh, like I am kind of a little bit envious, I'm a little bit jealous, all of these different things. Again, don't make it anybody's problem. Use it to motivate yourself in a positive way. And then also, the sheer power of the fact that if you're envious of someone else or jealous of someone else, being able to put those feelings aside, realize that the other person's actually like probably a fucking great, nice person, and they have more info than you. They have tactics and habits that you want to achieve because they've already got the thing that you want. And then going and collaborating with them to one up everything you've done before is so powerful. And you can only achieve that if you're willing to put your own negative bullshit aside to go and realize that there's so much you can learn instead. And so use it as motivation, but also use your ability to find these people that you're jealous and envious of to level up. Because I mean, if you're looking at an article, for example, from an author that you've made your nemesis, but you're taking it in a negative way, you're going to look at everything that they say and then go, well, fuck that point, I can't do that, well, you had it easier here, well, this was just sheer luck. And you're not going to take any of the actual advice in that same exact article. Versus if you're looking at them like, here's my nemesis, they just gave away their secrets. Oh, okay, they did this and this and this, how can I implement for myself? Well, I'm going to have to change that. That is where you're going to find so much more ability in yourself to get so much more done, because now you have literally the person you're looking up to that you're saying, this is the next step for me, and they just pass down the ladder to me. And then you're going to eventually be in that spot where you get to do the same exact thing, not even noticing that you have someone 5 steps behind you who's now grappling onto the ladder you just let down, and they're envious and jealous of you.
Right. And here's the thing, I said earlier that you can't, you're not going to be able to like perfectly replicate someone else's art, and that you shouldn't. But the thing is, benchmarks can actually be harder to set than people think. I know I've had phases in my life where it's been very clear to me like what my benchmarks are as I progress towards a goal, but they're not always clear. So one thing that you can emulate is you can look at other people's benchmarks. You can, I mean, just hop on over to like a Wikipedia page of your favorite author and look at their history and stuff and see at what point they accomplished things. And you can compare that to where you're at in your journey and go, oh, okay, well, I wasn't quite sure when I should be achieving things, or when I should try to be achieving things at least. And I can look at the timeline of this person I admire and take that on and try to make that my timeline as well. So it might even help alleviate some stress, because there are a lot of authors who didn't quote unquote make it until they were quite a bit older. So you might be able to then say, okay, my end goal is actually at like age 45 instead of 18. And like, whoa, you have just opened up a whole world of working on yourself and opportunity, and just keeping your eyes open for things rather than having blinders on and going, oh my God, I need to get this done by 18 because I want to be like a big author, when you could just look and see the paths that other people have taken and take from that and go, okay, like I'm doing all right. Like I'm all right on my timeline here. I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. And I mean, if you're not doing exactly what you're doing, you can adjust, and you can take that constructive path and use what has happened to other people and apply it to yourself. And I think that's a really, really important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good tactic. You just have to also understand that, like, if someone did achieve it faster than you and you're looking up to them, don't let that be something to hold yourself back or feel bad about yourself in any way,
Yes,
shape, or
yes, true.
form.
Yeah,
So be careful who
definitely.
you look at when you're doing that, because obviously if you're at like a specific age and you're looking at people who are just now becoming successful in their 20s, that's going to make you feel like shit, right? But you know I think that the timeline idea is fantastic, other than just be careful about those age ranges there.
Yeah,
But
that's a
even,
very good point.
yeah, but even like the order in which they did things, I think is also important. So if they, went and published their first book and then they did this series that really blew off, like, okay, do you actually even want or are passionate about going through that exact same phases that they did, or not? Do you want to actually go in a different path? And you might have to look at a different author, or if you might be just forging your own path that no one else has really done before. And there might be a good reason why they haven't done it, and you'll find that out along the way, but at least you were passionate about it the whole time and you learned a lot. Or you're going to go and carve the way for tons more authors to come up behind you as well.
Well, that right, and I think that when you do look at those people who are insta successes, right, that can show you what not to do, even if you love them as an author. Because I was actually just looking this up because I can't remember what happened. There was this author, Christopher Paolini, who published Aragon, that like dragon series, and it was a big deal because his first book was out when he was 15. He was 15 years old and he got this deal. And I remember being, yeah, he's only a few years older than me. And I remember being around that age and just walking through a bookstore and finding out about this and being like, I'm done. Like, that's it. Life is over. Life is over. It's not going to happen. Like, that's it. Because this guy who was 15 got a book published and I didn't. And the thing is, if you look him up, he had this series that went from like two until 2011, and then he like didn't do anything for ages, and as far as I know, like we don't hear about him in the same way anymore, right? So you might look at someone like that, and if you love the work they were putting out at 15 and you admire that and you're jealous or you're envious of that, right? You might then look at the path and go, oh, that kind of wasn't great that he had that happen, because then he had to develop in a different way, and maybe I want to do something different. And look at, and I mean, take a look at an author who's maybe your age and see what they're doing and that kind of thing. So there's a lot that you can do. And even like you said, not having necessarily a timeline, but an order of operations, essentially, that can help. So you could look at an author who got published very young and realize, oh, this person completely made it their entire life from the time they could like hold a pencil. They were so obsessed with this, they didn't stop, and they actually have years more work than I have currently, even though they're younger. They have been putting their heart and soul and all their effort into this, like, and not doing anything else for years. And that's why that happened, right? Like there's so much nuance, so much nuance. And I think it's really important to not only research inspiration, like get inspired by creative things, but research the people behind the works that you admire to see what they're doing, and that can be immensely helpful.
I think too, young successes usually have one of two things happen, and this is not like in every case scenario, but from everything that I have personally seen, is that they either had a leg up in life in terms of connections with a parent or, money or different things like that, or they made everything in their childhood about this one thing and they worked their absolute ass off. And in doing so, they usually lost their childhood in doing so. You even see child stars from Nickelodeon, Disney, they either had a connection or they worked their ass off and that was their entire personality. It was their entire life and they lost their childhood. So, in the pursuit of wanting what you think that they have, would you have been willing to go and lose your entire childhood, your entire teenage years, your entire 20s dedicating to this one thing over and over and over again? Or would you rather have gone in with more life experience? And so I think that in and of itself is important. Like I know for me, I dedicated myself fully to writing, and that's why I can type so fast. I went from sixth grade at a second grade reading level to by the time I entered high school, I was at a college reading level. So it took me 2.5-ish years to go up several grades in reading because I dedicated myself fully just to writing and reading and consuming everything. And I honestly did not have much of a childhood due to trauma. I did not have much of a teenage years because I just spent the entire time also with trauma, but also because I was just writing the entire time. That was my escapism. That was everything to me. That was literally, I went home after school, I did my homework, and I wrote until my dad made me go to sleep. And that's all I did. My weekends were just pure writing days. And so I only had that experience because I knew, hey, I'm going to be stuck at home, not able to go anywhere, not able to even have, like, I didn't really have friends or anything like that either, that I'm going to go and write my own friends, right? I'm going to go write my own life experience because I didn't have any. And so then what did I do in my college years is, I was like, hey, I didn't really get to live, a lot of experiences when I was younger. And so I feel like my writing is very naive. It is, good, solid writing, solid prose, good structure. I know the craft like the back of my hand. However, I do not have the lived experience to write a lot of things authentically. And so what did I do in my college years is I went and I partied. I had fun. I went out. I was walking the whole town after being incredibly sheltered, not able to go anywhere. And then I was finally an adult at 18 and literally told my mom, like, hey, you cannot force me to stay here. Like, you cannot, like, unless you're going to kick me out, You cannot make me stay when I say I'm going to go somewhere, right? And as soon as I got a vehicle, and my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, got a vehicle, like we were gone. We were exploring. We took 2019 and we ended up going to fucking Australia, New Zealand. I went to Toronto. I went to Hawaii. Like I went to all these places to experience as much of the world as quickly as possible because I had spent the majority of my life not going anywhere.
Jenna, why are we the
And
same
so,
person?
right,
Again.
you're literally you're literally
I'm
the
just
maniac.
like, again. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but all that to say, like, I could have already had a book out if I continued to dedicate myself during those years to just the pursuit of publishing. If I had not done any of those things or had those life experiences, but then my writing also wouldn't be as good. Like, there's tons of people who they dedicate themselves and they have a book published at 15, 18, whatever it might be, and they have the same sort of childhood star issue happen where they don't write any books anymore. Like, I know the guy who did Warm Bodies, he was pretty young when he had that come out. He didn't end up meeting any of the deadlines for the rest of the book series. No one even knows that the rest of the books have a series for Warm Bodies. There's a whole series of it.
I have a friend who, and I think this is important to mention. I'll be careful the way I word it because I want to, say something. I don't want to say anything he would feel like annoyed with or something. But I have this friend who, and I think this is a really important thing to add because we're talking about young people, right? So he was not like a young author. He had put work in, but he got this deal that was like the most insane deal you could imagine for a first time author, especially where we were located at the time. Like, insane deal, nuts. Like, the province was going crazy about it. And he had been working on things sort of slowly and working on this novel. And it's a beautiful novel. I love it so much. Like, I admire him so much. And the thing that happened to him was he got the deal, but it kind of ruined his entire love for writing for a really, really long time. I'm gonna hopefully have a talk with him about this at some point on like my YouTube channel because it's not something people talk about, but you can, oh my gosh, you can achieve that. And I'm going to get back to the life experience thing too, but like this hit me, and I think we need to address it because you can have that deal hit you, and maybe you're not experienced enough with life, right? This plays into it, that you're like, whoa, wait, what just happened to me? So he was suddenly swept up, and people think this is the dream, right? Like, swept off your feet, you get a whole bunch of money, you get an advance, you're doing the signings, you've got the publisher, and like it's just crazy. So he put this book out, and what did he do when he finished the tour, the whole media thing, all the the publishing, everything that comes with that when you're launching a book? He freaking disappeared. He vanished, just like off the face of the planet, pretty much. He left, I think it was his sibling, with his house to like care for his house, and he just like went. No one knew where he went. He just disappeared, and it's now been like probably 2 decades or something, like maybe like 15 years, and he still hasn't put out another book because his love for writing was so obliterated by that money and the marketing and the attention, and he just had to disappear and completely rediscover himself, try to live life, learn new things, meet new people, and get out of that space that he had been put in. And now he's found something that's a little more like where he wants to be. And the last time I talked to him, so like when he was at the peak of this, he told me before he left that like that's it, that he had one book in him and that was it, and he's not writing anymore. So that's what that did to him. And when I talked to him last, he told me that he's going to write again, and it was just like the best thing to hear. And so it can be like your dreams can be a really bad thing if you achieve them at the wrong time. And yeah, like for me too, I had zero real life experience, and since I decided to go all in with writing, that's one of the reasons I'm traveling this year, because I realized I was looking at my writing. I was writing about places I was dreaming about but had never been. I hadn't experienced a lot of different cultures, and I want to write people. I want to write places. Those are my main things. I love writing places as if, they're an entity. I love writing about like the intricacies of humans. And to do that, you can't just be in your little office all the time. So, that's why I'm traveling right now. So you really do have to balance, world experience with people, and not just hide out in your little zone all the time and doom scroll and be miserable and think that your book is going to come out and it's going to be perfect, because that's not how it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, it's what's one of the best things I think you can do as a writer is to go and travel and to meet people and interact with different cultures, especially if you're going to write, your own cultures, your own world building in fantasy or sci-fi or different things like that. But I think that comes to a sort of a crux of an issue that I think would be, wrong to not bring up, the fact that for so many people that is just simply not an option. They simply do not have the income, the means, and different things like that. And I think too, we can't have this conversation without also talking about the marginalized people and different things that affect them in a specific way. So in all of that to say, like, of course you can't go and experience all these other cultures the same ways that we did because we happen to have the funds at the time to go out and to experience them, right? We had the flexibility of, like, Holly, you working remotely, like that's a
with
thing that you can
Yeah,
do and
like
not
with
many people
this
are able.
with the
Yeah.
CEO who actually encourages traveling, because sometimes like you're remote but you're not really remote, you're at home, you're locked in. Like there's so many different things. Like, yeah, it's rare. I will say, like, it's very rare, and I'm really grateful to be in a situation where not only am I working remote, I'm able to do that kind of work, but I have like a boss who actually encourages it. Like that, it's one in a million, I think.
Well, it's funny because I have like the same thing
Yeah, I know.
because we're
Okay.
the same
Well,
person.
okay. See, we're both the one. We count as one.
But
But no, like, I know we're laughing now, but this is a very, very important thing to bring up, and I'm glad you did.
yeah, yeah, but I think too, like, there's gonna be points in time when you're gonna look at someone else's timeline and you're gonna be like, well, they were able to do X, Y, Z by the certain time that I like the same age that I am. They were able to accomplish more. But again, to bring it back to that, Nickelodeon, Disney, kind of thing, so many people are only able to make writing or other creative pursuits their entire lives because they have someone else supporting them, because they grew up from money, because they have a spouse who takes care of them, because they still live with their family, because they were able to go and get a very nice job straight out of college and they don't have any debt anymore. They paid that off. They already own their home. They're not working solely to be able to live, and they're not working to survive. They were already in their thriving period, and they were able to achieve that so much earlier in life because of the situation in which they were born into or they married into or just other things that for marginalized people we don't have access to, right? Like, I know I would be much farther in life with my writing and my career if, well, I don't even know that for certain, because if I had had a really stable, wealthy upbringing as a child where I didn't have like all this sort of trauma associated with my home life and my childhood, if I'd been more like at peace, if we had been more financially stable, if I didn't come from poverty, a lot of that influenced my writing. So I don't even know if necessarily I would be a writer or if I wouldn't have found yet what I wanted to do, right? But
It
for
probably made you stronger too, right? Like, so there's always two sides of the coin. As much as you may not want those elements that made you stronger. Like, there's a quote about, I'm strong because I've had to be. And I've related to that a lot, like, especially with financial elements. Like, yeah, I mean, you and I both, we don't come from like wealthy backgrounds. We obviously have many privileges in other ways that other people don't, but like in that financial element, of course, like, yeah, we did not have that support, and we don't have that thing to fall back on, right? And honestly, like, I'm at this point, I'm glad, because it makes me more focused on that and able to not just take it for granted. So that's something.
yeah, I think that was one of the main things I always found myself super envious of, is because I would look at other people's success in writing and they'd already have a book published and be like, well, I haven't been able to achieve that because you had a spouse taking care of you financially and you were, yeah, you're like, I'm busy, at the time I was working retail, I was working two jobs, I was, doing a million different things. And so I was not able to dedicate so much of my time because I didn't have a spouse or a parent backing me. I did not come from wealth. I have chronic, oh, dog in a chair behind me. um, I have chronic illness and chronic pain, chronic migraines. Like I have chronic stress. I have everything chronic, right? I didn't have necessarily the financial or emotional support a lot of my life to go and really go after my dreams in any real capacity. I only had the ability to sit down in my lonely little corner that I cut out for myself and wherever the hell I was living at the time to go and write my stories as the form of escapism. Not even necessarily because I half the time enjoyed what I was writing. I was just writing to get everything bottled up inside out. And so I was held back in a lot of ways because of that. But then I was also able to dedicate more of my time to that for a period of my life because that was the only thing I was doing. And so at the same time, my, you know, fucking trauma from being sheltered and forced not to leave the house for a long time, it ended up making me interested in YouTube, to make my YouTube channel, to go and do that kind of content. It made it so that I was able to literally only solely focus on writing for a long period of time because I literally didn't have an option. Anything I wanted to do had to be in the house, most likely in my bedroom. And so there was pros and cons to all of this. And so I realized other people might have been jealous that I was better at writing for, at a younger age, simply because I did it more often versus they went and had fun. And I was jealous because they got to go and have fun and go outside. And I was jealous that they had, financial backing from their parents and that they weren't chronically ill and that they didn't grow up as a closeted queer. They didn't, have the same life experiences as me. But then I realized I wouldn't write the stories that I do if I had been in that certain way. And a lot of those people, here's the thing, so many of those people that I was so envious of because they had so many things easier for them because they were not marginalized in the same ways or weren't marginalized at all. They were able to have those things easier at an earlier point in their lives. But as soon as shit hit the fan, they fell off.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have any sort of resiliency built
No,
up in them
no
to deal with the
tools.
challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also their writing is more likely to be more naive. It is more likely to go and veer on the side of not being any sort of realistic because their life in itself was in a lot of ways not realistic for the vast majority of people. And I will never in my life at this point envy someone else because they don't have the, same experiences, because they're not able to write and cater to a vast majority of people because they were simply given things. I would so much rather have worked for every single thing that I have to simply have been given everything on a silver platter. I don't think my soul has ever decided to enter a body that was just lucky, that had everything given to them. Because the things you have to learn in that situation is how to deal with things, right? If I ever had a life like that in a past life, that was like my first life, and ever since then, I've already known how to deal with shit. Like I am the person to go to when shit hits the fan because I will always have a calm head about it, and I will just make whatever the situation is work to the best of my abilities, and I will always make do. And for so many of the people, they do not have that ability, and I would not wish any of the luck in the world to have all of that luck, but then the second that something bad happens, I do not know how to cope. I would not want that to be my reality. And so I'm no longer envious of people who had all those things handed to them because half the time I don't see them on social media anymore. They didn't really stick around, right? Because they had something happen in their life and then everything fell apart and they were never able to get up again. And if they were, I respect the fuck out of them. So why would I be jealous of them? Now they've put in all of that work similar to what I have done. And so I don't feel all of that envy anymore. If anything, they should now feel jealous looking back at me, knowing that I will always keep going. And they know if something else hits them, they're going to have to learn all over again. Right. And so no matter what side of the pendulum you're swinging from, in my opinion, people who from a marginalized background, especially like women of color, especially like Black women, especially like the queer community, we're always going to go and figure out a way to make it through. Whereas people who have people who have like a zillion privileges in life and had everything handed to them, it's going to be a fuck ton harder for them to be able to get back up on the horse the second that things fall through.
Well, and the other thing, as I know we're coming up on an hour here. This is such a big topic, right? But another thing that I think this leads into is gratitude. And people who have everything handed to them, they don't know how to practice gratitude. Like they have to actually learn how to practice gratitude. And I mean, I don't want to make a blanket statement. Obviously there are always like different, differences between different people, but largely if you have grown up just having everything handed to you, you're not going to be as practiced in gratitude, being thankful for that, being, thankful to yourself for achieving things and, to others for helping you out, because it's just, it's a way of life. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. Like it's just something. I have a lot of friends who do have a lot of privileges, like far more than me, just because of the weird space that I grew up in, where my parents, my like poor as heck artist parents somehow managed to get an old house in this neighborhood where everyone else made like a ton more money than me. So I've interacted with a lot of people where I was very much an outlier. And they have had to, the good ones who I love and who I'm still friends with to this day, they have worked very hard to practice gratitude, to learn how to move through life in a more grateful, strong way, where they're not, taking from other people because they don't want to do that. Um, and so it is easier when you're accomplishing these things, and when you've been through the trials and tribulations, and when you've had nothing, to be grateful. And I think that being grateful is really important, and especially when you're feeling envy and jealousy and all of these negative emotions, being able to sit down and go, okay, but what do I have? What am I grateful about? It's a really good thing to be able to do. And I think that when you've struggled through a lot of things, it is easier to pinpoint that. So you're always going to be able to do that exercise a bit more easily. Like everything that I have that is positive right now, I will just sit down every once in a while and just be like, dude, like I've made myself do this, where if I'm walking down the street somewhere and it's a beautiful day and I'm enjoying where I am, I will just stop and I'll be like, just sit in this moment for a second and be grateful. And it comes to me as just like, I did these things to get here, and I'm doing this, and it's such a great feeling. And I think that by going through stress and difficulties and problems and fighting your way up, rather than just magically being like that person you're looking at on the internet, you are going to enjoy what you have so much more.
Yeah. And I think too, the easiest way to combat, all those negative emotions like jealousy and envy is for the thankfulness and the gratefulness for what you do have. And I think one of the best things to be grateful for in any situation, whether or not you come from a privileged background or whether or not you kind of, either were marginalized or had more things to fight through, um, is that you have an unfair advantage, whether you recognize it or not. And that's one of the main pinpoint things. I think you got to figure out why you want what you want, and then you also have to figure out how you're going to get there and what's your unfair advantage to get yourself there, right? And your unfair advantage is going to be something built in most likely to the way that you grew up or your personality or something like that, right? So a person's unfair advantage, if their parents pay for everything and said that they could live in the beach house on the back of their house, like their pool house, right? Then my unfair advantage is that I have financial security in the form of my parents who aren't making me move out, who are financially supporting me, and I get to go all in. And I was jealous of people with that unfair advantage so much. I was so envious that they had either a supportive spouse who was doing that for them, a parent that was doing it for them. But at the same time, anybody who's lived in that kind of situation where, like, as a child, I had to rely on my parents for everything financially. And that could become so toxic. So, obviously I'm assuming when I was envious of these people that they didn't have that kind of upbringing. But a lot of the times they do. If you're going to be financially supported by another person, there's certain obligations that you have that they might not feel is something to be envied, is that they hate the fact that they have to rely on their spouse for everything. Like, that was one of the main things growing up that I learned right out of the gate, was that you never allow yourself to be put in a position where you have a man controlling all of the financials, right? You never. And like, I love my husband, I would love to, eventually be like a stay-at-home sort of like mom who I author first, kind of thing. And stays home and works from home, but I will always want to go and have my own source of income. And I've told this and had this conversation with him multiple times. He's working so that eventually I can just fully work from home. I can fully, focus on my novels, and he can kind of support me. But I told him straight up, if it ever comes to a point in time where I am bringing in absolutely no income, know that I might not be saying it, but I am highly uncomfortable, because just simply of who I saw around me as examples, right? I had my dad who worked super hard so that he could be the primary caregiver, and then when he died, my mom was basically already tired. She had no idea how to go back into the workforce. She ended up working at Sears. Sears is closed. You can guess how that, right?
That same
And
thing happened with my mom too. Like when like she was with my dad and working for him, so she was stay at home mom, and she would also do bookkeeping and stuff. But because of that, she dropped her own career path. And she feels bad about that she entirely dropped it, because she's like, there's still some things that I should have been doing to keep that going, even though I was enjoying being a single, like, not single, stay at home mom. And yeah, so when they split up and it was an unexpected thing for her, she was at a total loss. So yeah, like I've definitely looked at that and gone, I don't want to be in that situation ever.
Yeah. But see, I think I had those blinders on where I was envious of people who had a spouse, most likely, most of the time, a husband supporting them in their writing, or they had a parent. But then I started thinking about it critically, took the blinders off, and realized, was I comfortable or happy or feeling my best when I was financially supported by only my mother in high school? Was I happy when I had to beg and plead with her for money for tampons and pads? Was I very happy when I had to go and eat whatever was put in front of me, even if I absolutely hated it because we didn't have a choice because we didn't have any other food? No, I hated it. As soon as I went into college and I got my first fast food checks, I was buying my own food, my own groceries, realizing that the food that my mom and my aunt were cooking me was making me actively really sick and it made me gain a lot of fucking weight. I it was impacting my health having to rely on them and them only for all of my necessities. So then I look at other people who have the same situation where they're in their 20s still living at home with their parents. This is their main source of income, or they're not even producing income yet from their books. And now I'm not really jealous or envious of them anymore because I would much rather have a day job, make income on the side, doing writing, and then live on my own with that freedom to be able to make my own choices than to be in those shoes. And the same thing with people I've looked at who have their husbands fully supporting them in writing. Sure, again, I love and trust my husband, but would I ever feel fully comfortable knowing where I grew up with the situations that I grew up in, especially like with my grandmother who fully relied on my grandfather for every source of income. She never really, properly worked. She did like a little bit back in like the fucking 60s or something like that. And she was a stay-at-home mom of 7 children. My grandfather cheated on her repeatedly and had a bunch of other kids in different relationships. So would I ever want to be in those shoes where she knew that that was happening behind her back and she could not leave, where she could not make any financial decisions of her own? Absolutely the fuck not. Again, don't think my husband would ever do that to me, but would I even want it to be an option on the table to know that my entire life and being is held in the hands of someone else financially, emotionally? No, I would never be comfortable with it. And so now I don't really look that enviously at people who have the main breadwinner and be their husbands and they're just doing their writing and it might bring in an income, it might not, it doesn't matter to me because I wasn't envious of their money. I was envious of the fact that they got to spend all of their time doing their writing, doing things that they're passionate about. They didn't have to go and work 2 jobs. They didn't have to go and, do these things to try and make income. If they made anything extra, it was extra money. It was not income that they necessarily needed. That was what I was jealous of the fact that they wholly got to spend the whole day writing. They got to spend their whole day working from home. Now I predominantly work from home. My job is not that fucking difficult to do. I still bring in my own money to sustain myself. And as soon as I'm done working, I get to go and work on things I'm actually passionate about. And eventually, one day, I'm hoping that will turn into me working full time from home for myself versus for somebody else. But I'm done being jealous and envious of people who, oh, I want that thing, I want that thing, but I don't want how they got there. And that's the difference. Why I will never be jealous of those people. If it's someone who worked their ass off to go and be able to support themselves with their income through writing books and then they decided to quit their day job, then sure, like a little bit of me is still like, like that would be nice. But I'm looking at them as I want to achieve what you've achieved. Tell me and give me the steps. Let's collaborate together. I want to know, write an article, what's your YouTube video advice on this. I'm not looking at them as like that's the actual enemy in this negative connotation. I'm looking at them like that's where I'm going to be in 5-10 years. That's what I'm going to go and do. That's going to be where I'm at that point in time. And past me would not have seen it that way and would have had the blinders on. And I think taking that off and realizing that is a step that I think every creative person has to do, or otherwise you end up being that toxic person that all of like the circles talk about, like don't talk to them. They'll talk shit about you behind your back, all of those
And
things.
those people always fail. Like, I mean, I can't get into it now because it's a whole other story, but I mean, I've seen it time and time again. People who get lost in that, they get tangled up in it, they do negative things to people, and they vanish. Like that, it every single time. I have not actually, like, without a shadow of doubt, like every single time, you will disappear. You will vanish. You're not going to go anywhere. That's it. You'll be done. You won't have a community. Nothing's going to happen for you. That's absolutely it.
Well, I think too, like the negativity just shrinks you. It just makes you feel so small that you go in on yourself. Like, and I've experienced this. I've never like gone out of my way to go shit talk someone in DMs for no reason, right? Like I've gone like, hey, this person did this fucked up thing. Like that's a different scenario, right? But if you're taking this person who you've made your quote unquote enemy and then you're making it everybody else's problem and they've done nothing wrong, that is where I always hold a problem with. That's where I'm always like, listen, this is not like cool. And I've defended so many people because I've had tons of people in, my writing, not career yet, but in my writing circles who go, oh, Jenna's talked shit in the past, so I can go and talk shit to her. I've talked about shit about people who have done terrible things like fucking scammed people or are fake agents or, groomed people, other things like that.
You're doing the thing that brings those people down, which is how they get brought down. Like there's two different ways of talking shit, right? Like the community will come together to bring you down, or there's what you're getting into, which is the talking useless shit where there isn't anything to actually share that you shouldn't be sharing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a difference between like, hey, this person did this, or I think they're doing this. Like, can we talk as a community to kind of figure out what the fuck's going on? Is this true? Like, there was all of the, what was it on Twitter a little bit ago? There was the person who was pretending to be a Mexican non-binary or trans person, and then they were actually white. That whole scenario that happened, like, yeah, that's like the shit talking circle of the group chats that tell people like, hey, this is not a good egg in our mix, right? They're gonna like spoil the whole thing. And so that's like a separate thing. But then you always have those people who go, okay, this person mentioned this before, so I think I can go in with my theories or my feelings about someone and talk poorly on someone who I've never even spoken to before, simply because I have a feeling about them, because I've made them my enemy in my head because I'm jealous or envious of what they have, and that's the shit I don't play with. So there's been several fucking times I've had to shut people down in my DMs, like, hey, absolutely not. We are not going to go and tear other people down simply for the fact that you feel jealous and envious of what they have, and they haven't done anything. When they've done something, then you can come in my DMs. Then you can come and tell me that, hey, they were really freaking rude to me. They did this, this, this. Like I'm going to keep this as vague as fucking
Yeah.
possible.
I mean, there's
But
so much in this conversation where you and I are both like,
yeah, yeah. But I've had several people over the course of the years with a specific author that I've known, I've DM'd with, I'm on and off close with over the time, and people would come to me and be like, "Hey, is she like for real?" There were certain things that she would say, and they're like, "I just don't think that like she's telling the truth about certain things." And I would go and verify to the best of my abilities without actually like DMing her and bothering her with people's theories again about how she's feeling, like, about how they feel about her. That I'd be like, hey, no, like from everything I've ever been able to tell, she's completely genuine in, bad things that happened to her or in this, this, and this. Like, every time I've talked to her, she's been a nice, kind person. So I haven't heard anything with someone meeting her in person or her in someone's DMs, like actively being a toxic person. So like, no, it just seems like she's, genuine in general. Right. And then specifically, I was talking to a specific other author who I had just met, and I was talking to her, and I was mentioning like, hey, like I know, this author, we're in a similar circle, all of those things, and she was like, oh yeah, like I met her in person last year, and I had had a specific interaction with this author, and I had gotten some weird vibes and I felt really brushed off by her, and I was like, maybe she's just going through some stuff, like I don't know, but like she came across really rude all of a sudden, and I was like, that's really weird. She's never really come across this way to me before. I don't really know what is going on with her all of a sudden. Like I think she's still genuine with things that she's going through, but like this was a really weird interaction, right? And so then I was telling my friends about it, like I don't know, I just feel really weird talking to her again after this interaction. And another author had told me like, no, I actually met her in person a year ago, and we were in a large circle with a bunch of authors, and I was the only one there who didn't have an agent and wasn't getting published, and she was already an agented published author. And she basically, was meeting people and shaking people's hand throughout the circle and getting to know everybody. And when she got to the person I was talking to, she was like, "Oh, and who's your agent?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't have an agent yet." And she then proceeded to completely and utterly blow her off and ignore her for the rest of the
Oof.
conversation.
Oof.
And I was like,
Ooh,
"Ooh,
that's not good. Yeah,
ooh,
not
yeah." I
good.
was like, "Okay, that very much felt like the same interaction that I had kind of had, And so I was like, "Okay, this is a little weird. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of like take a step back." But I've been spending, a very long couple of years defending her and saying like, no, she's, genuine in certain things that's going through her. I have not heard anyone speak badly of her or anything. And now that I haven't heard that she's like lied about certain things in her life or anything like that. So if anyone still asks, I'm going to defend those things. But specifically, if anyone goes, "Hey, is like she's your friend? I thought we were, but after my latest interaction with her, I don't really feel that way." And then knowing how she treated someone else who I'm now close with, I'm like, now I'm a little bit sussed out about certain things, right? And that was, me talking to my friends, going, "Hey, I had this really interaction with someone I thought was my friend. Like, I don't really know how to feel about it." And then immediately hearing back from someone else going, "Oh, yeah, I had that same exact kind of interaction where I was completely blown off because I didn't have an agent." And she's kind of like climbing the ladder a little bit. And it was so much so that other people in their group literally noticed and were like, "Oh, that's kind of rude of her." Um, to that degree that other people literally noticed, and she kind of got really embarrassed and separated herself. And so all that to say is that, there's so much I imagine that could go on in these situations and these scenarios. And so over the years I've defended specific, people that perhaps I shouldn't have, because, I know certain things, and I've told people like, "Hey, like, no, they're genuine in certain things." And other times I've had weird interactions with the same person. But all that to say is that, okay, someone out there is envious. Someone out there is trying to go into my DMs to talk shit about her because of things that she did have, right? Or things that she didn't have, or thinking that she's a liar because of the fact that they feel envious of her, right? Or thinking that, hey, she's a whatever, she's this, she's this, she's this, right? Like we talk so much in a community, and in the reality, none of us really know. Like, even if I'm in someone's DMs for the past several years, even I don't fully know the person. Even if you met up with people, you don't fully know the person, right? And so we can only enter with sort of love and understanding for each other. And the only way we can get to that point is by acknowledging that, hey, we might have these envious feelings. We might feel jealous of other people. We might have all of these things, but how do we actually show up in the community? Are we actually going to defend each other when someone comes up with bullshit that has no backing and no proof? Are we going to go into the whisper networks and, try to sprinkle in some shit that's not even fucking true? Are we going to go and try to back each other up and support each other? Or are we going to allow the little monster of envy on our shoulder dictate how we treat other people? And that's kind of the same thing I started the beginning of this episode with. But our envy cannot dictate our actions and how we treat others. Only our values of how we want to deal with the truth of other people can, how we want to deal with our own truths of what we want, why we want it, how we're going to go after it, and how we're going to treat the people around us in our pursuit of our goals. And that's kind of the last thing I'll say on all of the very carefully worded selections that I made.
Yeah, I think that is a good place to just bring it back around to, because like, you have to be aware that there is that community. There's a community, and it can either be a very supportive, positive, inspirational thing, or it can be a negative thing. And you want to be aware of what you're doing, not just for yourself, but your wider image and everything like that. I think that that's important. And if if you take anything away from this conversation, which we had a lot to take away here, I would say, but be open, because I mean, maybe not everyone's like this, but for me, I, being someone who was, like, heavily bullied, didn't have a big social circle or anything growing up, I very much learned to be alone. Like, that's always been my thing. It's always been very much like me against the world, that sort of thing. And it was actually, like, it was work for me to open up and let people in and be a part of a community. And I'm so thankful that I did it. And as an artist, it can be easy to feel that competition and that envy, and just, put it aside, and open yourself up to other people, trust them. And I mean, don't trust them blindly, of course, but try to go into things with the assumption that people are going to be helpful, that they're largely going to be good to you, and then just be aware of any red flags that come up to protect yourself at the same time. And I think that that's, along with acknowledging, naming envy, and also feeling gratitude when you should, those are really important points that are going to take you like pretty far in your career.
Yeah, always be grateful and thankful, even for the things that you think that are holding you back. They might actually be your source of strength in the end and your unfair advantage. And you don't know these things until you've gone and taken the blinders off and you've looked critically at your life, critically at your own feelings, and made the conscious choice to look at everybody in your social media accounts, everybody in your life who makes you feel those nasty negative feelings like envy and jealousy, naming which one it is. Is it jealousy or is it envy? Are you afraid someone is going to take what you have? Because that's a different, bag of cans to deal with than envy, that you want something someone else has. What about that thing that they have that you want? Do you even want to be an author? If you do you want to be an author for what reason? Do you want to be a specific type of author that you're seeing online because you believe certain misconceptions about it? Or do you generally love stories? Or do you generally love specific things about the craft? And then go all in on it. Whatever thing it is, if it's your love for world building, if it's your love for the characters, the romance, the relationships, whatever it might be, find your people who understand and who get it. Find the people who you can look up to and who bring you those positive emotions. And once you've named all these negative emotions that you feel when you see certain people, if you cannot turn it into a positive, just unfollow, just mute. Like, there's no shame in that. If it's bringing you all of those nasty things and you can't turn it around yet, you might eventually go back to them and go, hey, I'm going to follow them in. I'm going to unmute them. I'm going to have those positive feelings now after you've done some personal growth and development. But for now, there's no reason to torture yourself. There's no reason to go doom scrolling and wishing that you had everything that they have. Especially if you're not going to take any action on actually achieving those things quite yet, because you have certain things you have to achieve first. If you're like, hey, no, I'm having a baby and I'm moving to a different country and I'm having all of these big things happen to me, but I'm so envious of all these other people who are going after their dream of writing a book, and you just don't have the time or the ability to right now, then what? Mute all the authors that you have that are making you feel those nasty sort of feelings, and focus solely on the steps you need to take to be able to free up more of your schedule to be able to write books, finish your move, raise your kid, for a couple, years or so until you have some more free time in your schedule. Focus on what is right ahead of you, not these impossible things you can't fit in your schedule quite yet, simply because of your life circumstances. Because your life circumstances are going to be completely different from other people. And I think that's something that sadly we all have to accept, is we only have 24 hours in a day. And for a lot of people who do not have certain privileges, like wealth, like supportive family, like, a housekeeper and a spouse who fully supports them, and people who go and cook on, do their every whim. Like, people always say we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce and we don't do as much. But I'm sorry, Beyonce has a personal chef, a fucking home cook, someone to take care of her kids. We do not have
Personal
the same 24
trainer,
hours.
like
Yeah.
assistant who's dictating what she's going to do each minute of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for the majority of us, we wouldn't necessarily want Beyonce's life either. So we don't necessarily want all of that help. Some things we want to do for ourselves. And so we don't all have the same 24 hours, and we have to do with it what we see fit and see best. And so chase that dream of yours, but acknowledge that you might have the same dream and aspirations as someone else who already has what you want. But the reality of all of those different situations is going to look so different. And none of the blanket statements we might have thrown in here, you know, apply to everybody. You might be someone's from a super privileged background who's unfortunately stuck being the housemaid and the assistant and the, personal chef to your whole family. I know I was for a time. Like, you might not have all of that time that other people are envious and wish that you had, but take every single moment as an opportunity to learn.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. Uh, and I really hope that everyone has taken what we've said here, and can put it into practice, because these are all really important things. I think that the things that Jenna has said and the things that I have said have been I mean, I'm speaking for both of us here, but I think these are probably some of the most important things that we have learned that we're talking about here, is dealing with this topic. So this is a more important one, and I think that's why we've taken a bit more time on it than usual. And we're actually going to extend this a little bit in our episode next week, where we are going to be talking more about collaboration and positive collaboration, and sort of showing a bit of a case study, not just with myself and Jenna, but also with our very first guests on the podcast. So I'm really excited for you all to listen to that. We're going to be speaking with the author and the artist on my latest publication with the Stygian Society, Matt Pohl and Nico Rudolph, who are two creators who came together from very different places, very different backgrounds, and we created a little team to make a really cool book. And I think that's going to be very interesting for all of you to hear. And obviously, Jenna and I, being your hosts, are going to have our own say about our own collaboration, which is a whole other thing too. So look forward to a very sort of positive, inspirational episode next week.
Yeah, so remember to subscribe and follow us on Spotify and on YouTube so that you can get the next episode sent straight to you right away, especially on YouTube. Click that little bell. And remember to like this video too while you're at it. And you're already down there, so you might as well.
Yeah. Just support us. We have so many more interesting things to say and to show you, and I know that you're going to enjoy hearing it. And we love hearing from you, so be sure to let us know what you think in the comments down below.
Yeah, I'm curious how many people actually know that there's a difference and what the difference is between envious and jealousy. That was a huge mind blowing.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Let me know if you already knew that. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love when we can put something potentially new out there into the world here.
Yes, do let us know if you knew that down below and what your thoughts on this topic as a whole are, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.